Excitement is a bad idea with a baby
Dog,
and a
but it's
dog.
different. Whole germs lick my kid. I think that's super irresponsible.
Absolutely. Dogs carry parasites that are transferable to humans and dogs, obviously. That's a big risk as a pregnant person. I don't want my dog to start barking at people approaching, coming inside or approaching
I
my
want
baby.
my dog to protect my kid. The dad can't even go towards the bassinet. We don't need that bond instantly.
That level of protection to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not cute. It's not funny. And we're not going to allow that.
Liz, we just gave birth. We're on our way home. We get home. What's the first things we should be doing with our dogs or shouldn't be doing? Because that can just be just as important as what to do.
Absolutely. What not to do would be to focus on that immediate greeting with the dog and the baby, because you have just gone through a very strenuous labor. More than likely, you're exhausted, and you have a newborn that you are learning how to care for. So worrying about that greeting with your dog is just not the first priority. What I would do, what to do, is to really focus on your dog being calm around the baby.
And that's mostly like dad's job, right?
Correct.
And if we don't think that dad's capable or willing, should the dog just go to the trainer?
Absolutely. A lot of our clients focus on too much of, who's doing what, and we try to simplify it as much as possible. We offer boarding for our clients or board and train. So if you're sending, your dog to training and you've made that decision, a great time to do it is when you're at the hospital. And so we get dogs all the time when mom's delivering. And we give, the dog's gone for 2 weeks. We give mom a good, week and a half to 2 weeks to really get in a routine with the baby. So that way when the dog's coming home and trained and calm and under control, it's a lot easier for mom and dad and baby and dog to coexist.
Yeah, I remember last winter we trained a dog. Like, he got dropped off. Labor was next day.
Correct.
And then two weeks later, we took the dog home. And, like, mom was able to walk, was not, like, on bed rest anymore, and was able to just, like, accept the benefits of their dog instead of forcing, like, oh, I have to heavily work my dog right when I'm back from the hospital.
Yeah, it's very daunting, especially if you're nervous about what your dog might do or how your dog might react. And so simplifying that with sending it to the trainer or just focusing on those calm behaviors. If your dog does have an obedience base and knows place commands and knows down commands and things like that, very helpful to utilize those. And you nailed it on the head that dad or partner or whoever's helping, your support person, should really be the person to be focusing on the dog if you're the one focusing on the baby.
Yeah. I mean, as a dad that's to be, I know that first week, almost every dog related thing is on me. Like, you're not going to be feeding, especially like we feed raw, right? Like, I don't need you around raw food when you're handling my baby as well. So like just nailing those things out, like making sure that the dogs are still a priority, but knowing that mom can't she can't have two 100% priorities.
Absolutely.
Because that's not fair to the dog, the baby, or mom.
Yeah, having baby and dog fully depend on one person, you kind of have to pick and choose what you're doing. We don't want to necessarily take anything away from what the dog's getting, and so it's a great way, for dad to be able to walk the dogs when mom's napping with the baby or nursing or whatever that might look like. But definitely, focusing on not necessarily taking away as much that the dog has or has had in its routine. So feeding it normally like you would, playing with it, walking it. If you need to drop it off at a daycare or a training facility like us, like we've been talking about, that's super helpful, because then the dog, their daily activity isn't lacking because you have less hands or priorities, obviously, because the baby takes that first priority.
What are good commands to rely on to get your dog some stimulation while you're in those recovery states?
Place, down, come.
Yeah.
Place is one of those commands, and our dogs are placing right now. If you guys can see, they're calm, they're relaxed, they're more than likely taking a little nap, and this is a great way for your dog to, get tired, like mentally stimulating. There's distractions, there's people in and out, babies doing what baby does, crying, eating, things like that. You're up and down with your baby, and your dog should be existing or coexisting while not exactly interacting with every little thing that's going on. And so that's a command that, like, I think is number one for a lot of people is place and laying down on place.
So, we see all these videos online of these Goldens or these dogs like super excitedly like greeting their new family members and even licking them. Why is that a bad idea?
Excitement is a bad idea with a baby and a dog because you're getting a dog that with excitement is more than likely going to jump, more than likely potentially going to use its mouth, its teeth, and also the germs that your dog may have in their mouth. Maybe your baby isn't ready for those types of germs.
Yeah, I mean, the doctor was talking about not letting, during this season that we're going to be having our kid, letting other family members kiss my kid. So why would I let... Oh yeah, let me let this animal who may or may not have just licked his butt lick my baby's face.
Certainly not in the first weeks. I'm sure there's, some good to having bacteria or germs introduced, but not in the first week of bringing your baby home from the hospital.
I mean, we've heard horror stories like right now, like you're not letting any dog kiss your face because we've heard the horror stories of what, parasites can happen to you.
Absolutely. Dogs carry parasites that are transferable to humans and dogs, obviously, but that's a big risk as a pregnant person to take, to let a dog lick your face if you don't know that it's, obviously we give different preventatives, but it's not 99, 100%.
I guess that's a good thing to talk about too, is making sure your dog is on the right preventatives and dewormers while you're pregnant and when the new baby comes, because if it's got Giardia, that's transferable to you and the baby, and that is miserable.
Absolutely. Yeah, parasites and all of those gross infectious diseases that dogs and animals can carry. I mean, it's tricky. And so we can be, it's contagious to humans, but we can also be treated of that. So if you were to get Giardia from a dog, you could be treated of that. Unfortunately, I don't think pregnant women can take those medications. So they just have to deal with the consequences. The consequences can be either no symptoms or all symptoms, and that's gross.
Yeah.
I mean, as a pregnant person, you like, there's already enough symptoms. I don't want any of that. And so when you're preparing to have a family, or that you're pregnant, I would get your dog into the vet, get them a stool sample, let them check everything, and then let them tell you what kind of preventative your dog should be on. That should be flea and tick, heartworm, and more than likely that stuff will kick out any parasites and keeps it at bay.
Yeah, and if your dog is kissing the inside of your mouth, please stop. Just stop.
It's the grossest thing.
Some
I
people-
love my dogs, but I don't need your tongue in and around this area.
Yeah, I think it's wrong. So, I mean, what's after the newborn stage? Like, like when do they start moving? When are we like tummy time? Like, what should your dog do when your baby's in tummy time?
Tummy time is really great for babies, and this is an awesome time for them to be using their reflexes, practicing those muscles, because they've never, sure, they're bouncing around here, but they are learning as much as we are about them. And so with the dogs, place is a great way. I've been railing on place. Place is it.
Yeah.
Using place is great for tummy time. Your baby's in its place doing its tummy time. And that usually is, on a rug, or, we have a nursery or a a registry list, and so Tummy Time is like one of those things that I have on there, is to have this little mat, and it's got all these little activity things. It's really cute, but it looks a lot like a place, but it's babies or dogs. So definitely focus on working on place with your dog or down.
Could I place my dog on that tummy?
No.
No?
You don't want hair on that and
germs.
drool or germs or anything unnecessary. There should be a lot of distinction between what is babies and what is dogs.
How do you make that determination between what is babies and what is dogs? Because like a lot of the toys look
very similar. Yeah, and that's a great question, because dogs would look at maybe a baby toy and not necessarily know, like, hey, this is mine or not. Maybe there's a smell on their toy because they've carried it around in their mouth before, and this has no general smell of theirs. Well, we get that all the time, that dogs are eating and picking up baby toys, and that's a costly expense if it's going through the digestion system, but it's also just a bad behavior. You might get your baby crying because the dog took the toy, and then obviously the medical expenses and how serious it is if the dog does ingest the toy. Ways to combat that would be for the dog to have a solid understanding of no. Whether you need to work with a trainer on that, which most people do. I would say a lot of our calls are that of, my dog just doesn't have boundaries. We need boundaries. And so obviously you have the commands, but you also need for the dog to know no or drop it. If it's their object, they can have that. If they're picking up other things, I would correct that and then redirect them into what they can have. Redirecting just means no to baby toy, yes to your toy.
Yeah. I would add on to that, like, my big fear is a dog taking possession of a baby's toy from baby, and how dangerous that could be, because, these animals, they can get like very fixated on something that they love. And while that's great, like, like them satiating their drive, big words there, but just like doing something they like. And then that thing being in someone else's hands can cause a bite, can cause a reaction, can cause a growl, which, like that's another topic that we'll talk about soon. But I think it's very important to make those lines in the sand before baby comes. I would have this stuff out, and we're going to have this stuff out on the ground, and the dogs can't touch it. Like, it's just a line in the sand of like, hey, that's not yours. If I give it to you, or if it's a ball or a bone, free game. But if it's my kid's stuffy, no way.
Absolutely. Right now in our home, we have a bassinet set up, we have a swing set up, and those are great ways to start not only introducing just the inanimate objects to the dog, 'cause some dogs are weird with inanimate objects, but just getting them used to that area. And then also on top of that, having the baby toys in and around those areas, along with sounds, like playing baby sounds, like a baby crying. Maybe you wrap up your phone in a blanket or a small towel and you put it in the bassinet and you let the crying go. And you should ideally have your dog in some sort of command or redirect your dog to a command if your dog reacts to the sound of the baby crying.
Scared or
interested
forward.
and wanting to go towards it. Because as a baby cries, you as mama or, partner, dad, should pick up baby. And so those are activities that we need to do before baby comes, so that way the dogs are used to reactions towards sound, but not them reacting towards sound. We react towards sound. We, pick up baby and console baby. I don't need the dog interested in what baby's doing and trying to console it. It's not your job.
Yeah. A very common thing we hear from pet parents as they're getting ready for introducing a baby is, oh, I want my dog to protect my kid. And while that's great, we don't need that bond instantly. That bond can be developed. And you got to remember, you already have that bond with your pet yourself. So that dog is more than likely going to want to protect Liz when she's feeling vulnerable already. We don't need to, oh, hey, make this like newborn super close with my dog to create that situation. So like all that to say is like we still need that separation right now, super early on.
Absolutely. It's great for a dog to instinctively want to protect from danger, but how often are you running into danger? It's really low. And how often are you inviting people into your house when you have a baby? We talked about that earlier. I don't want my dog to start barking at people approaching, coming inside or approaching my baby, because I have to go and pick up my baby and console that. And we see all the time on social media people taking videos of their babies and their dogs, and it's just not funny. There was one recently, and basically the dog is protecting the baby from mom and dad.
Yeah.
And that's not funny.
We've received calls on that where like the dad can't even go towards the bassinet without the dog like squaring up
into the nursery. Like it blocks the doorway. And that's not cute. It's not funny. And we're not going to allow that. Yeah. And so people call us all the time for that, to help with that, because that's a big, serious problem for that level of protection to happen.
Yeah. And then how do we transition out of like this separation into, hey, like this toddler or this kid has to interact with my full-grown dog?
That's a loaded question. There's so many things, but I really would love to work on the dog, walking with the baby. And so what that looks like is babies in a stroller, or when your baby's older and you maybe have more of like a wagon setup, whatever you have, your dog should be walking. And again, this is something that you can start before you have baby, with walking your dog and pushing the stroller.
Or a cart at a supermarket, not a supermarket, but Lowe's or Home Depot.
Absolutely. And we as trainers can help you with that. If that's a big struggle, you need that help. I tell parents before they're parents to do that immediately. Like even before you have baby shower, get a stroller. Sure, it's on your registry. I don't care. Get it. Practice. Because
even if it's a cheap one, just go get one to practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's important to have. And so you should be able to, walk your dog with your baby in the stroller. So that way your baby gets used to your dog gets used to your baby. And then as they grow, that's definitely part of, your daily activity, how to integrate them to less separation, more like your baby's more active. Definitely stroller and walks.
Awesome. What age, like I think of Taleen's kid, what age can my kid tell my dog what to do?
I honestly, as soon as they start, picking up on the commands, and that's everyone's, that's everyone's opinion and cup of tea. Like if you don't want your kid yelling at your dog, sit and come. I think it's the cutest thing in the world. Yeah. And it's amazing that the dog actually responds. If the dog doesn't care about it, it's like, okay, it's just, it's meaningless. I would say at any age that your kid is doing that.
Yeah. If your kid can say sit, go for it.
Go for it.
Now help them, right? Like if you are the one leading the dog in that situation, help them so that can be a transition. But I've seen kids as young as 3 walk a dog in the heel. So, not calling out anybody who's an adult that can't walk their dogs, but I've seen 3-year-olds do it. So
definitely assisted, right? We've as trainers have helped families with their little ones to walk, for the dog to respond to anybody. Assisted though, right? Like if you have a big powerful dog, you might want to hang on to the end of the leash just in case, kind of have the dog here, baby, or I'm sorry, not baby at this point, the toddler holding that leash, and then you're on the end just in case, to make sure that, there's not an issue.
Or if they're e-collar trained, they're off leash, not at all touched and you have the remote, you help them stay in that spot for the kid. And the kid can say the word, you click if you need to click.
Absolutely. What are some things that you don't want your toddler or baby doing to your dog when your dog's just existing?
Well, this is a great thing. Like we've been telling anyone with younger kids, lock your e-collar remotes. Don't have it super available because kids love to press buttons on anything. So like if it's a cell phone, if it's a tablet, if it's a toy, they don't know that this remote that looks like a walkie-talkie is not for them. So they're going to dial it up and they're going to click that button and they're going to correct your dog. I don't want them doing that. I don't want them jumping on my dog. I don't want them pulling at their pain points. So if I have like a older dog, like let's say Baby, our female pit bull, she has sore back ends. At no point will my toddler be able to touch her back end. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to advocate for my dog in that situation too, because advocating for my dog will keep both of them safe. Right? Sometimes it's like unrealistic to just be like, Baby, you can't react to this situation. Baby, as in my dog, in this situation, even though you're in pain. So I have to make sure my toddler understands like, hey, we don't touch that dog there. I know you can grab Battle and you can jump on B, but you can't do that to Baby.
Absolutely. Yeah, education with your kids at an early age is super important. Dogs, I'll be honest, are a lot more manageable when they're trained than a toddler. Toddler, you tell them no, and they're very determined, or they cry. And so you have to kind of pick and choose. I tell people this, my clients all the time that have kids and dogs, who is easier to manage in that situation? I can recall my dog away from food. I can't necessarily get my kid to leave a snack that my dog's, getting into, whatever the situation is, but you need to advocate for both, but manage who's easiest to manage at that point. And more than likely, our trained dogs are the easiest. They will come to us, 99.9 or 100% of the time. I don't think my toddler is going to come over to me 100% of the time if they're really enamored with something. So advocating and managing and working on who's easiest to manage at that point.
So if you had to sum up what the steps would be for you and your dog after birth, what would you say?
Step 1, you should have already, I'm going to preface this, okay? You should have already determined whether or not your dog needed training and sent your dog to training, or worked on things at home, whatever your situation is. But your dog needs to have a base. So we're going to preface the steps with that. Then you go through your labor, you bring your dog home. Step 1 is you're not handling, as mom, you're not handling the dog and dad's handling the dog. Working on calm behaviors, correcting behaviors that are unwanted, like jumping up or let's say I have a bottle in my hand. If my dog wants that object because it thinks it's a toy, that just can't happen. Step 2, I would say separating areas like the nursery from your dog or the bassinet from your dog, making sure that there's that distinction between where your baby would lay down or be in a rocker or nursing or things like that. You have your stations. That's very normal. Those are things that we're setting up right now in our home. So you want to be able to separate. Do you have number 3 for me?
I do have number 3. Number 3 is have your commands ready. Know what your dog's strengths are and their weaknesses of, hey, I know they can hold place for an hour. So when I know I'm giving tummy time or I am at my wit's end, I'm going to use that tool of, hey, go place and lay down, feel comfortable. In that continue the separation. And if I had to summarize it, it would be separation of dog and baby until we can merge them together. But that's a slow process.
Absolutely. You don't want to rush that. And so even just separating, like you had talked about the toys of baby, the things that are babies and the things that are dogs, that's important separation to have and distinctions to have with your dog for sure. Feeding times, when you start actually having your baby in a high chair, a lot of people like to let their dogs, at the feet of the high chair, licking dropped food, and the kids just think it's hilarious to give the dogs food, and that's also not a really great boundary. That's up to you as a parent of your dog and your kid, but more than likely you're going to maybe have some guarding issues there,
or you'll have Bjorn.
Yeah, a fat dog.
He's a fat dog because he gets all the waffles and peanut butter jelly sandwiches.
So
because the kids just love to feed him.
You don't want that. So distinctions there, separations there.
And I would just finish it up with, it's not going to be easy. And with that, but it'll be worth it. And on top of it all, it's very simple. Follow like basic understandings of your dogs and commands, and you will get through that with ease. We've seen the worst dogs who have aggression and separation anxiety and possessiveness, all have successful lives with their families, with new babies. So we're making it out to be serious, but we just want to give it that level of seriousness so that way we can have it easier going forward. Because if you do all this stuff right the first time with the first kid, each kid should be easier and easier.
Absolutely, because you'll just know the routine, know what to do, and it just kind of is second nature. So one last point I wanted to say is, don't be a sitcom dad. Don't be that guy that says, well, the dog listens to me when your wife or your partner is struggling. Don't be that guy. How many times do we get that?
I mean, that's the majority of the guys we get. Love you guys to death if you're listening. But I think we have a lot of bad role models in that sense of like, well, the mom's always done it, the stuff around the house. Well, step up. Take care of your dog. You love that dog. Make it listen. Make it be better.
And you love your wife or your significant other, whatever your situation is. You love that other person.
And you love the baby.
And you love the baby. And so if you are unwilling to work with your dog to make it easy for your wife and baby, that's on you. And that's a big problem. So figure it out.
Figure it
out. Don't be that guy. I always tell wives and moms that, if your significant other or husband is unwilling to change, then you need to up the ante. You need to up the motivation. So there was at one point that I had a conversation with Jacob about, hey, you're doing X with, it was Battle. You were stealing the breaks from Battle. I would put Battle in place, and then he would come home from work and just have the fun. But it made me look like the bad guy that has to keep, putting him in command and correcting him. And so I said, Jacob, you're making it really hard for me, because if you step into the room, everything's out the window. So you got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And so that motivation of me explaining that it's hard, he was able to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to make it hard for you. And so as a partner or husband, you shouldn't want to make it hard for your wife or your mother of your child. Like, what are we doing here? So up the motivation, up the ante.
Don't be a Kevin.
Don't be Kevin. Don't be a sitcom dad. Like, don't be that guy.
Cool.